This presentation is dedicated to the novel approach to the last painting of Eduard Manet, A Bar at the Folies Bergere, from 1882. There are a fair number of misconceptions about this painting, and this presentation is an attempt to sort them out. In a sense, the painting is much less mysterious than it perceived by many observers. At the same time, Eduard Manet yet again is trying to capture a real-life moment by means of paint and canvas. The result, in my opinion, is much more about the skills of Eduard Manet and his personal reflections than anything else depicted in this painting. This video and the research it is based on are not the product of artificial intelligence or any other automated research and writing tools. The material is new, and not all statements in this video have the same potential to withstand the test of additional research, time and reason. Use at your own discretion. And you know what? All rights reserved. The narrative is heavily dependent on the supplied visual material. Please, do not hesitate to pause the video to get a better look. From past experience, it is known that some viewers are irritated by the narrated voice. Please, keep in mind that you can mute the sound and simply read from the slides. The slides will continue to change after narration is finished in the background. I do not have a quality of voice and performing ability to do my own voiceovers. The budgetary considerations are also a factor in the choice of robotic voiceover versus a live one. Questions and comments are welcome. On the right is a preparatory cartoon by Eduard Manet, and by comparing those two I've made a few interesting conclusions. Notably, from the preparatory work it is clear that the club was kind of small. To alleviate that impression, the back wall of the club had large mirrors installed. It is easy to see a reflection of the chandelier in the center and, viewers, right mirrors. Apparently, this setup did not work for Eduard Manet. In his finished work, the back wall is further away from the viewer and it is decorated with murals, or possibly a single mural obstructed by massive columns in the middle and viewers left, depicting some picturesque ruins. It is not unlike decorations in some modern Asian eateries around the world. Eduard Manet loved to play games with details on his paintings. One of the games is the shapes of the skyline on both murals. It closely resembles the shape of the supposed reflection of the chandelier, but it is, in fact, just a tease of sorts. It is a similar game to what Eduard Manet played with Olympia's hair, that was noted in the separate presentation. In both preliminary draft and in the final work, the public is far removed from the protagonist, and at the other side of the bar. In preliminary work, the depiction of those people blurs with their own reflection in the mirror close behind them. On the finished painting it is just a large crowd. On the finished painting the bar itself is quite large, and we stare at the inside of the oval or rectangular area surrounded by the bar counter and gates that we do not see on the finished work but can figure on the right on the preliminary painting. On the finished work the area inside the bar is so spacious that it is able to accommodate an island, a design concept familiar from the modern luxury kitchens. All in all, Eduard Manet made the bar, the establishment, into more opulent and upscale in his finished painting. This slide is to underscore the difference between murals and mirrors on the painting. There is a clear depiction of the architectural details such as arches as a clue to what Eduard Manet really painted. Arrows point to arches, architectural details on the mural, and skyline purposely made to look like a reflection of a chandelier. Visual game with Olympia's hair is included for reference. This slide shows the same details as the previous slide, only brought up closer for better view. Now that we know that there are no mirrors in the vicinity of the bar, we can contemplate what are the functions of those two women depicted. There are two women in both paintings, not the woman and her reflection in the mirror. The reason why both women look similar is because they are wearing a service uniform as they are members of the service team. The function of the women in both paintings are somewhat different. In the preliminary rendering, the women look like bartenders. The bar is small, and if they are not bartenders, or barmaids, it would beg a question: what would they be doing there? In the finished work, Eduard Manet depicted a somewhat more opulent establishment, and the function of the women is somewhat different. They are beverage dispensers. They mostly serve waiters fulfilling orders of the customers, not customers directly, unless one would walk up to them. When an establishment has a large number of customers and the bartenders are busy serving customers at the bar, beverage dispensers help to speed up the service. The champagne has an interesting hint or detail. It is rarely served at the bar but commonly ordered as a bottle service for couples or groups of friends. Individual serving size champagne has not been invented yet in the lifetime of Eduard Manet. It is interesting that both women have workstations organized in the similar way, a hint to both efficiency and aesthetic implied in the painting. At the woman's right hand are beverages: wine, ale, champagne. At the left hand is a vase with oranges. The bottle of expensive hard liquor is between them, so they can both reach it upon request. That meticulous organization is yet another evidence against mirrors and reflections. If the woman in the back was a reflection of the woman in the front, her workstation would be a mirror image, with oranges on her right and bottles on her left, not in the way Eduard Manet depicted it. The island table behind is for additional bottles, or, possibly, for bottles of the similar beverages opened by the bartender to serve customers at the bar. This way, when a new bottle is needed, an already opened bottle would be used first. Now it is time to take a closer look at the woman in the center of the painting. The first thing that comes to attention is her clothing. This two-piece attire is actually a service set, and the other lady is wearing the same outfit. The lace could be an individual touch, but the top and skirt are standard. In the past, uniformed service was known at the courts and very well-off households, but only upscale hotels, clubs, and restaurants could showcase uniform-wearing service. There is an obvious problem with her uniform. The cutout is too low and supposed to show too much cleavage. She is uncomfortable with that, and she used a small flower arrangement to prevent exposure. Her face is provincial, and she is not enjoying being out in the open, for everyone to see. The woman is noted for wearing jewelry. In the 19th century, as in modern times, young women rarely purchased jewelry, especially as prolific as her medallion, which is a tasteful conversational piece. The two common sources of jewelry are romantic giving and inheritance. Choosing between the two, I would say that woman wearing estate jewelry. The woman doing okay, the jewelry is expensive, but she does not need to sell it to pay bills. At the same time, expensive jewelry is a suitor repellent, as most men would measure themselves unworthy against such luxurious decorations. Now we know enough to figure out the main theme of this painting. Apparently, in his twilight years, Eduard Manet became somewhat of a moralist. This painting is about a woman's choice. At least a woman's choice contemporary to his time. The dichotomy of the choice, as implied by Eduard Manet, is between marriage, or aspirations to marriage, symbolized by champagne, and beckoning of love and sensuality epitomized as forbidden fruit, oranges in particular, positioned by her left, sinister, hand. Love and marriage were not necessarily linked at the time, and it was, obviously, an uneasy decision to make. In fact, the main protagonist is actually saddened by the need to make this kind of choice. Another message that Eduard Manet wanted to convey by this painting is much less subtle, and it is more like practical advice. But before we can get down to it, we need to take a look at how the idea of this painting came about, at least what I think about it. From what I can surmise, the bar painting, just like a luncheon on the grass, was conceived from the straight and humorous observation, this time by Eduard Manet himself, in person. Man of smallish stature approached a barmaid in the club with some kind of drunken romantic overtures. Barmaids, selected and hired with their look and stature as a decisive factor, are slightly amused by the conversation during the slow moment at the bar. On the side note, it is obvious that participation in such conversation is not exactly equal or voluntary. As long as the customer stays polite and respects boundaries, bouncers will not get involved and ladies would have to endure this exchange as a part of their job duties. For the observers, the whole thing is a free, spontaneous entertainment caused by the obvious height mismatch between the counterparts. By the way, there are two ladies there, not the barmaid and her reflection. There are mirrors in the back, but they are irrelevant to the central theme. The bored barmaid in the front is wearing a flower in the middle of her cleavage. This is to attract attention, not to cover excessive exposure. Flower is on the dress, not above the cutout. There is an enduring opinion that female staff in the real-life bar/club moonlighted in the oldest profession. In this case, the endeavor of the diminutive man could be seen as an exploration if the ladies will lower their standards on the slow night. It goes without saying that in his final version Eduard Manet pivoted from the grim and seedy reality towards the setting that suited his needs and purposes. Curiously, there are no forbidden fruits on the counter of the real bar, they obviously already consumed them. It was noted by previous reviewers of Eduard Manet's painting that it has an image closely resembling the image of the woman with the opera glasses from the painting, In the Loge, by feminist impressionist painter Mary Stevenson Cassatt that she produced in 1878. There is a various explanation of this inclusion, but I dare to state that there is a full-blown dialogue between the two notable works of art. This consideration would have to be more detailed, as at this point the consensus about the painting by Mary Cassatt is way off. The woman depicted by Mary Cassatt in the Loge is shown on the mission. She is not a casual, leisurely observer. She is a part of some kind of drama. She is clutching the fan in her hand like a weapon. She is depicted with disappearing lips and leaning forward like an admiral in a heat of the naval battle while trying to make out what is going on the enemy ship. Disappearing lips are a noted sign of stress, nervousness, and tension. The subject of her attention is most likely either her unfaithful husband or a romantic rival. The scandal that surrounds her is known, that is why the man in the nearby loge is leaning out of his loge to get a better look. This is generally not a proper or safe behavior. There are people down there and one can drop something when leaning out. The whole posture of the woman tells that if not for the expanse of the theater, there would be a catfight. I honestly do not know why Mary Cassatt painted this painting, and neither did anybody else, as Mary Cassatt destroyed all her notes. It is possible that she looked at infidelity and divorce as the part of women issues that she was known to be involved with during her lifetime. As for Eduard Manet, he was only too eager to turn the Shakespearean tragedy into a joke, the same way as he did in his Olympia. Bellicose nautical allusions in the painting by Mary Cassatt did not escape the eyes of Eduard Manet. He dressed his single woman at the bar in the nautically themed outfit with windbreaker cape, or scarf, and a hat resembling a tricorn hat of a naval officer. Nautically themed clothes come and go in fashion over time. Eduard Manet used them to reinforce the observational intentions of his character, who is watching people using opera glasses. The character is not just a jab towards the painting by Mary Cassatt, it is a part of a larger subcomposition. There are three people at the bar, also they are separated by something that looks like the stand of maitre d'hotel situated between them. There is a man and a woman engaged in conversation and the aforementioned woman in a nautical outfit engaged in observation. From the first glance the subcomposition looks random and hastily put together. From the second glance, however, there is weird, but definitely intentional similarity between the women. If one looks like a naval officer, another looks like a sailor. While the naval officer observes the people in the dining room on the other side of the bar, the sailor is engaging in the conversation with a man beside her. To make his humor come across, Eduard Manet painted the already mentioned maitre d'hotel also wearing a tricorn hat. Eduard Manet literally separated women into two distinct types, those who engaged men in conversation and those who preferred to observe men from a distance. There is a man in a tall hat who looks like he is approaching the woman with opera glasses. From her posture, however, she is unlikely to let him take a seat at the bar by her side. The whole subcomposition is much more important than it is perceived to be according to the traditional analyses that I encountered by preparing this presentation. It is actually an important reiteration of the main theme. Reiteration is a humorous tool invoked by painters on occasion. For example, The Feast at the House of Levi, by Paolo Veronese, is a painting about Christian theological problem of father and son. On the level of evidence and humor, Paolo Veronese reiterated the father and son themes several times in his painting. The theme of father and son repeated by Paolo Veronese at least 6 times in the painting, Feast in the House of Levi. On the left are generic fathers and sons, soldiers or servants. Relation can be traced by general appearance, shape of the ear and shape of the nose. On the left are particular fathers and sons. There is a Saint Augustine with his mixed-race son Adeodatus. There is also Ottoman Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent and his similarly dressed son Said Mustafa. There are 2 figures of writers that also look like father and son, but yet to be identified. All of the above was painted by Paolo Veronese to focus on the main concept, or joke, of the painting, Feast in the House of Levi. Having something in the painting reiterated most definitely a sign that the painter wanted it to be noticed and processed by viewers. As I have mentioned before, the original situation that probably prompted Eduard Manet to start working on this painting was completely reworked and transformed. The men in the main composition, and in the reiteration, are of normal proportions in relation to their female counterparts. An allusion to drunken approach is gone too. The man and barmaid are engaged in conversation in earnest. Her posture, slightly inclined forward, and animated face of the man are signs that they are in dialogue, not just in the Q&A exchange. Also, the man's and barmaid's heads are in the comfort zone of each other. Most people would only let someone get this physically close only if they like that person, with the notable exception of trying to overcome noise while in conversation. When an undesirable counterpart is trying to trespass into that space, most people would just instinctively pull back and restore a proper distance. At close distances like that, counterparts can see small details on each other's faces, and even smell each other's breath. That is part of intimate interaction, not a casual one. In this painting it looks like a man is a legitimate suitor of the barmaid, and she doesn't mind his attention. It is apparent that the lonely barmaid in the center can overhear the conversation in the back. It is apparent that Eduard Manet liked to depict people in the heat of the moment. The figures in the back are a hint what kind of moment it was. In the back, adventurous suitor in the tall hat is shown approaching the woman with opera glasses. Too bad, she is not likely to take interest in him. That is what just happened to the main protagonist of this painting. One of the patrons in the bar decided to approach the young barmaid. He did not get too far ahead. His impromptu sign of attention, 2 roses in the wine glass, the roses that he probably stole from the table flower arrangement, are still in front of her. She rebuffed his advances quickly and decided that it was not something serious. But overhearing an involved conversation of her coworker, she is having contemplations that one of those uninvited adventurous suitors could be a real thing. There is not a lot of materialistic consideration there. The level of the club hints that all men she can encounter there are on the same, or comparable level of income or standing. If she wants to have a family someday, she will have to make a choice and try to get to know one of them. But at this point she is still alone and waiting for someone who will help her sadness to go away and her dreams inch towards being realized. Judging from the way how lovingly Eduard Manet depicted her, it is easy to deduce that he was not just a casual observer. Too bad that he is in bad health and far along in years. Just as in his younger years, Eduard Manet could be easily imagining himself to be the next one to try to get her attention. It might take more than 2 stolen roses, but she is worth a try. It is known that Eduard Manet actually invited a real barmaid named Susan to pose for preliminary painting in several sitting sessions. For the time it was as personal as it gets. But the life of Eduard Manet was almost over, and he knew that. Susan, a seasoned people watcher, just like many people working in restaurants and bars, probably understood that too. It did not go very far, and all Eduard Manet can do is to paint. A woman waiting for love. Now for eternity, for everyone but him.